Hello and welcome to Xpandable by Fibonacci X. Xpandable is a series of conversations with operators and investors where we try to demystify the venture building journey. Thank you and subscribe to us. Today we have Vinay Singh from Fireside Ventures with us. Vinay is the co-founder and partner at Fireside Ventures, a venture capital firm that invests in early stage consumer brand. With a background in marketing and entrepreneurship, Vinay has played a key role in growing brands in sectors like food, wellness, and personal care. Before Fireside, he co-founded Stepney, a connected core maintenance platform, and worked at Bank Bazaar and Unilever. Vinay's expertise lies in scaling businesses and supporting startups to reach their full potential. Welcome, Vinay, podcast.
Thanks for having me over.
I always like to ask people about the very beginning. Obviously, your background, as I understood, was more in the marketing in previous roles. That's your topic. But even before that, how was it like growing up? Because I know your life experiences dictate a lot what you do much later in life, right? Where you get at and how you build your career. So maybe some memories or some experiences which have shaped your thinking and which have led to career choices which you made later.
Yeah, I mean, nothing very fantastic about the childhood. It was a very normal childhood. My dad had a transferable job, so I grew up in 5 cities. And towards the end of my schooling, I got really enamored by engineering and design. And what I did not want to do was architecture because one of my uncles was an architect, completely dissuaded me. So I said, what's the next best thing? And I did naval architecture, which was building ships and stuff that is not on land. So, because that was something the family didn't allow. So, after having spent a couple of summer internships, I landed up post my undergrad at Larsen & Toubro. And after about 6 months there, I realized this is not an industry for me. It's highly capital intensive. The only way I can have potentially my own shop here is by having a design consultancy. I can never get into the core industry because it's so capex heavy.
Right.
So that's when I kind of asked some of my seniors and some of my friends, what can I do? How can I switch? And I said, why don't you give the cat? And that's what I did. Ended up at IIM Bangalore, and in the extended family, this was the first kind of like postgrad. So I called up a couple of my dad's friends who had done postgrad. I said, listen, uncle, abhi mil gaya. Where do you think I should do my summer internship? Everybody said, Hindustan Unilever mein karna. Achhi company hai. So that's what I tried to do. Fun fact was I went to college and I applied amongst many other companies in the summers. One of the companies I really wanted to get into was Barclays, and they didn't shortlist me. So I went to the placement office and I was very upset, and I said, listen, I have represented my undergrad college in football. I am one of the key members of your football team, very important in the sports fraternity within the college. Why is the only football company not shortlisting me?
Right.
And that's when the placement agency, the placement office of IIM Bangalore said, listen, Barclays is a bank. And I was like, I always thought they were a football company. So that was my knowledge of the corporate world back then. So the second best choice was obviously Hindustan Unilever, because that's what uncle said. So that's where I ended up, and I love my summers out there, right? I think a little kid who didn't know much, they just trusted me and threw me into the boondocks of Uttar Pradesh and said, travel 20 towns and cities out there and come back with a plan of how you're going to, make color cosmetics win in that geography. And they had a brand called Lakme. And a lot of young brands like Blue Heaven, Color Bar, etc. were coming up at that point of time. And I fell in love with the consumer industry then, and that as I was finishing up the summer internship, they said, "Would you like to come back?" And I said, "Hell yeah, I would like to come back." So I ended up joining them for about 7-8 years. I was there, did sales, marketing, bunch of brands. That's when in 2012-13 felt super uncomfortable, right? Like I said, मजा आ रहा है, consumer business बना रहे हैं, brand बना रहे हैं, but the real movers and shakers or the inputs of building a brand back then were how much can you distribute and how much reach can you generate through mass media. And big boys game.
Right.
And that's when some of my friends of friends were starting out in consumer internet. Myntra had just raised their Series A, so had Flipkart, so had Ola, so had Urban Ladder, first internet 1.0 companies.
Yeah.
And a handful of these founders I knew either through directly or as a friend of a friend. And so I flew down to Bangalore, spent a week there, talked to a bunch of these guys and said, "Ki kya ho kya raha hai?" And I think at the end of that week, I was convinced that I am going to be a dinosaur as a marketeer if I don't understand this new way of consumer business building, which is not dependent on mass media or mass distribution.
Right.
It is and that carpet bombing big boy approach is not going to work. It has to be that precision rifle shooting, understanding data, targeting, segmentation, audiences, understanding how digital media works and how digital distribution works, which is through e-commerce, through... So I came back and I told my boss at Levers that I want to leave. And they said, "Okay, so where are you going?" I said, "I don't know where I'm going, but I don't want to do this anymore because every one more day I spend here, I'm not adding to my understanding. And you become complacent." And I said, "That is going to really hurt me." So I quit and then talking to a bunch of people. So one of the founders, Adil, who was running Bank Bazaar, he gave me a mandate saying, "Listen, I have a good B2B business doing digital identity verification for lots of banks, and we can now build, based on the same tech, we can build a consumer finance marketplace." And he gave me a very broad mandate of run the entire consumer side of the business. So product growth, performance marketing, all of it. And I said, "Listen, I don't know any of this." And he said, "Yeah, I didn't know technology when I started, so I know you figure it out." So I thank him for taking the chance on me.
Talk to me about when you said you were thrown into different parts of UP learning about. I think that's where these consumer companies are very good at, because some of my colleagues from BCG have gone into P&G, Unilevers, and some of them really enjoy that kind of work, reading the pulse of the masses, going to the ground level, studying the trends, doing the experiments, testing, etc. Right? So that helps you in, understanding the pulse of the nation, like what trends are working, what trends are not working.
Yeah, see, I think
it's like bottom-up kind of understanding.
Yeah, right? Certainly there's no substitute for working the market, meeting consumers in person, having group discussions, etc. But I think sometimes, and this is what has sometimes been a pet gripe of mine, that as a marketeer, the consumer will reflect what stimulus you give to them, right? And therefore, it is if you go out there without a hypothesis, then in general, either you will come back with nothing very insightful, or you will come back with stuff that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy जो होती है कि मतलब मैंने ये सोचा था तो हाँ यही सही है. What really helps me is when I combine that, first do the data work, create hypotheses, and create like very contrarian points of view to where the market could potentially go, and then use market work, consumer meetings to validate some of that. Because ultimately, real growth, insight, even sharpness in communication development really lies in being able to synthesize weak signals. If it's a strong signal, anyway, the competition will be there, and it will be hard to then you're fighting a who has more capital battle. So for me, I think that combination is really what's helpful. So look at what your distribution data is telling you, look at what your consumption data is telling you, look at what your market share data is telling you, synthesize that into, okay, so if this is what the data is saying, potentially A, B, C could be happening. Okay, now let's pack our bags, go to the market, talk to people, see what's happening in trade, and validate or invalidate one of these three. And if you pick up a fourth one, then you're super lucky. But that happens like lightning doesn't strike every day.
Right.
It's got to be a process.
Yeah, I mean, you touched upon several things. So one was confirmation bias, when you
Right.
already go and you see what's in your mind.
Right.
Second was having different mental models, having second, third level thinking,
Right.
cutting through it and then synthesizing, right?
Right.
Which is not easy to do, because I think when I even look back, maybe I started my career as a research analyst covering public listed companies.
Right.
And when I used to read the financial statement, then listen to the quarterly call, then sit with few people from the company. Early in your career, it's not easy to do. I think it also took me a few years to actually get an egg of it. Like, having those analytical conversations, reading
Right.
between the lines, right?
Right.
And I think venture capital as a field is unique because it's deep in the front end as well as in the back end, right? Other fields like in investment banking and all, right, it depends, like, are you in middle office or front office, or which desk are you running, and your scope is limited. But here, analytically, you go very deep because you're deploying capital. But here at the front end, you're also building relationship, meeting probably 5,000, 10,000 founders in a year, screening through, wading through people. So that way, I think the spectrum is unique to VC.
Yeah, and also I think combined with that, while that is unique, I think our job is easy because we're not deploying very large amounts of capital.
Right.
So we're taking risk with small amounts of capital. The model in which we deploy also is like, you put a small check, work with the company, then see how it's going, and then you can always double down and put a larger check
Right,
later. So
right.
capital at risk you manage through various models of deployment. What's interesting is that you're always kind of looking for what's around the corner and what might not be obvious today. Because if it's obvious, then it's done. Then it's a private equity game.
Right.
And in fact, that's something that we always think about, saying, hey, why is a business model that is heavily validated already in the market, then why should we be backing the 10th or 12th or 15th company that starts off on that business model, right? Because then the first 14 obviously have more capital at play there. So they are going to
Right.
crush you eventually. Can you build a small business? Of course, India is large enough to have small business everywhere, but that's not the excitement of a VC to build another small business. It's to build a large business.
Right.
The question is how can you be a little ahead of time, the analytical part of it, and say, okay, can we take that risk? And if we fail, that's okay. The model allows for it.
Right. But the other side is that at this stage, then the mortality is also much higher, right?
Yeah, I think mortality being high is part of the VC business model, right?
Right.
The trick really is how can you put a scaffolding in place of common pain points that allows for founders to, stumble but not fall, and therefore reduce mortality. And that can, at least in my humble opinion, only happen if there's focus. And if there is one kind of sector you go after, then there are common pain areas that you can build scaffolding for. Whereas if you go for many sectors, then you can't have like a kind of like a support system for very differentiated businesses within the same fund. So I think that potentially can reduce mortality. And in our business, while yes, our model very dispassionately allows for mortality, but it's ultimately a very people business. They're real entrepreneurs building real businesses, and I don't think we want any of our entrepreneurs to fail. So how do you build that scaffolding to reduce mortality? That's a virtuous cycle as well, because if you can do that, then the best entrepreneurs want to work with you, and then as a fund, things start looking good because the virtuous cycle gets kicked in.
Right, that's the value add you're indicating. So that's investment value add and alpha, and that's how you generate extra, right? So after your corporate
Reduce mortality, not generate extra.
Yeah, right. Correct. I rephrase that.
Generate extra is always the entrepreneur.
Limiting downside. Let's say that, right? So after Bank Bazaar, you did your own startup.
Yeah. So that was, I think, we built a fairly large business. We raised a Series C.
Okay.
I think we could have built it. I could have spent some more time there, but the entrepreneurial bug had bit me by then. Because if you remember, that's where I had started from all the way back 10 years before that, when I'd written the CAT saying, listen, I want to build something of my own. And so that's what led me to then start Stepney. And this was something that I deeply cared for. If you look at the garage system in India, it's a highly fragmented, unorganized segment. And in most cases, very, very uneducated people employed and running in this segment. Typically, the stories are very, very sad, man. Like that industry still employs child labor, kids grow up in garages, and then they don't know anything else. And then once they're 18, 20 years of age, they go and start their own garage. And because it's a vicious cycle out there, right? Because they are uneducated, they learn on the job, almost like a vocational training, working in some other garage as a kid, and then they kind of start their own garage. And then because they only know so much, they can only grow so much, and the next generation is pretty much trapped in that poverty trap. We said, what can we do here? Obviously, in my free time, me and my friends were petrol heads back then, still are with the limited time we have. So, loved cars. And we used to kind of like mess around with the ECUs, the electronic control units, to see how we can change performance metrics of the car without really touching the mechanics of it, right? So, air-fuel ratios, compression ratios, fuel pressures, all of it can be controlled. That's how you get your, in your cars of the modern day cars, you get sports mode and eco mode and all that. But back then there was no sports mode and eco mode in cars, but this is how it happens. So we're messing around with it and said, hey, if we can write data into the ECU, we can read data from the ECU as well. And all the errors that are occurring, etc., we can have some kind of a, back then it was a statistical model. आज के दिन अगर करते तो उसको AI बुलाते हम लोग.
Right.
But हम लोग back then what we were doing was we were just doing statistical analysis, saying कि out of the last 100 Hyundai i10s of 2014 vintage, what are the most common problems.
Right.
तो उधर तक तो पहुंच गए थे हम, because if you give your readers to enough garages, they will do enough scanning to get you that data. But वो common problem का सबसे common repair क्या था, वो loop पूरा नहीं हो रहा था. So we started asking garages to feed that back, and we started incentivizing them. Then we said कि अच्छा ठीक है, आप scanning free में कर लो. And typically to scan a car, these garages used to call a specific scanner guy who used to charge them 500-600 rupees. It was a massive thing for them to say कि यार scanner free मिल रहा है. We started getting a lot of data, both on what are common issues with cars by make, model, year, etc., and what are the common ways to solve it also, because the garages were then, because we put a garage kind of billing software, CRM software, all bundled into one, like a practice for garages, right? And so because of that, we could then close the loop out. So think about it, for someone who now grew up in a garage where he had a lot of experience with Tata cars, and now is 25 years of age, has his own garage. Before Stepney, if let's say a Volkswagen came into his garage, would spend 3 days just diagnosing the issue, because he doesn't have the experience of it. But now he had the power in his hand of having the same experience as a Volkswagen master would. because
Right.
it just has the largest data set of all issues a Volkswagen could potentially have of that age and make model for a certain error code, and what are the top 3 reasons why that happens. So out of 100 man-hours somebody spends on cars they've never dealt with before, 75 of them are spent on diagnosing the issue. That's gone. His productivity goes up, his ability to earn goes up, and his ability to either have a bigger garage or get out of that poverty cycle goes up.
Right.
So that was the purpose with which we started that. We scaled it up. In fact, then the garages came back and said, listen, just these services are not good enough. Can you give us customers as well? We said, sure. So we built a service marketplace on top of that. We ran that in Bangalore, in Delhi. Rest of the cities, it was just the services. And then in 2016, a bunch of players came calling, and we then decided to partner with Quicker. So June 2016 is when we got acquired, and I worked with them over the next 6 months to integrate it into their cars platform as both used car diagnostics and then the LTV of the customers after that for services.
Right.
Yeah, and then at the end of the year, when I finished my earnout, I kind of looked back and said, okay, I've learned something about technology, digital, feeling not like a dinosaur, maybe somewhere in the middle, like a, I don't know, woolly mammoth or something. But thoda evolution to hua hai.
Right.
So I said, कि ठीक है, अभी देखते हैं how we can apply this back to the business of building brands. And then that's when we started Fireside in 2017.
2017. Right. What were your 2 or 3 takeaways from that entrepreneurship stint? Like if you were to just, summarize, like these are the 3 things which I learned, or mistakes or learnings.
यार एक तो बहुत lonely journey है, बहुत ही lonely है, and like it is full of self doubt, and no matter who you are, how much you have achieved in your life, I think that question of self doubt, that question of now suddenly this the same people who would like you would never have to go to their office to meet them. They would come and meet you. You go to their office, you wait in the waiting room, and they still won't meet you. Right? That humbling experience, right? Oh, when your self-worth is based on you and not the kursi that you occupy,
yes,
or the title that you have. I think it's a humbling experience. It's lonely because we take our organizations for granted in the sense that all of us have done this at some point of time. And when we work, if we have worked in a large corporate, at that chai ki dukan, at that nukkad below this thing, there'll be some crib session that will go on, etc.
Yeah.
But I think the value of a corporate is whenever you're stuck, you have so much of support around you, whether it's in our world, in consumer, you're a supply chain guy, you're a finance guy, you're a boss who you can talk to in marketing, you're a sales guy. So you have a lot of people to talk to and sort out issues.
Right.
Whereas in a startup, it just you are it. Right, you're it. And the fact is that the people building startups, and it's hard to only do it once you have been on the other side. There's a lot of sacrifice, man, that every founder is doing, and they are kind of making very conscious choices to dedicate their time to building an enterprise. And that's coming at the cost of them not being able to spend time with their parents who are not getting any younger. It's coming at the cost of time with their kids who will not be the same age, and the cost of their time with their partners as well, right? And obviously their friends, etc. So,
right.
So they are actually so every relationship it's like a piggy bank. The more time you put, the more richer it becomes, and then you can extract. One day when it becomes rich enough, you can take it out and do something good with that relationship. And the less time you spend, it's a leaky piggy bank. It keeps leaking, and relationships become turn sour. So it comes at that cost. And I think just knowing that each of my entrepreneurs is going through that and more perhaps, but at least this, I think it's at least for and that was one of the founding principles of Fireside, right? Saying, "Ki, yaar, boss, how can we co-build alongside our founders?" It is always a relationship where we are uh, trying to be helpful, not assessing, not judging, and things that are very unique to the company, very unique to the customer, the product the startup is serving. Of course, founder will have to build that, but things that are common pain points, the scaffolding that I referred to,
Right.
how can we help with that? And if we have to co-build alongside founders, then we have to have the power of focus. And let's not try and build a fund that has, I'm a sector agnostic fund, or let's not do that. There is a power in kind of being concentrated and then going deep and building those capabilities.
Right. So, what I heard is you have empathy for founders because you've gone through similar kind of situations. You understand what it takes, basically, right?
I hope I do.
Right. This is one side, right? Second was that you need to work on your self-esteem while you're going through hardships because it comes from within, not to the position you hold in your previous role, etc.
Right.
Because people will not give you time, etc., etc. Right. So that's interesting.